It was supposed to be an ordinary autumn day. October 22nd, 2013 began like countless others at Danvers High School in Massachusetts. The hallways filled with the usual sounds of lockers closing, quiet conversations between students, and teachers moving from classroom to classroom, focused on lesson plans and end-of-day routines. Nothing about that morning hinted that it would become one of the most disturbing school crimes in modern American history. Colleen Ritzer was 24 years old. She was young, enthusiastic, and deeply committed to her role as a math teacher. Colleagues described her as patient, kind, and genuinely invested in her students' success. She believed in helping those who struggled, staying late when needed, and creating a classroom where students felt supported rather than judged. That belief would tragically shape her final hours. After her last class ended, Colleen remained in the school building. One of her students needed extra help, and she agreed to stay behind. It was not an unusual decision. Teachers do it every day, often without thinking twice. Schools are meant to be safe spaces. Classrooms, hallways, and restrooms are not places where violence is expected. That assumption, that sense of safety, was shattered that afternoon. The student who approached her was 14 years old. His name was Philip Chism. To most people in the school, he was quiet, socially withdrawn, and largely unnoticed. There had been warning signs in the months leading up to that day. Disturbing writings, violent fantasies, behavioral changes, but none of them had coalesced into a clear intervention. Like so many tragedies, the pieces were there, scattered and unconnected, until it was too late. At some point after classes ended, Philip convinced Colleen to follow him to the second floor of the school. Surveillance cameras later showed the two walking through the hallway together. There was nothing visibly alarming in those images. It looked like a teacher helping a student exactly as she had done countless times before. Inside a restroom on that second floor, the situation turned horrific. Investigators later determined that Philip attacked Colleen with a box cutter, inflicting fatal injuries. The brutality of the act shocked even seasoned law enforcement officers. This was not a moment of accidental violence or sudden panic. It was deliberate, sustained, and devastating. What makes the crime even more disturbing is what followed. After the attack, Philip attempted to conceal what he had done. He tried to clean the scene, to hide evidence, and to move through the building unnoticed. Eventually, he left the school. Colleen Ritzer's body was discovered later that afternoon. The discovery triggered an immediate lockdown of the school. Students and staff were ordered to remain in place as police flooded the campus. Parents gathered outside, terrified and desperate for information. News helicopters circled overhead as rumors spread rapidly through social media and television broadcasts. The shock rippled far beyond Danvers. A teacher murdered by a student inside a school restroom was almost unimaginable. The crime struck at the heart of what schools represent: safety, trust, and guidance. The age of the suspect only deepened the disbelief. 14 years old, barely a teenager, Philip Chism was arrested a few hours later. From the beginning, the case raised difficult questions. How could someone so young commit such an act? What signs were missed? And how should the justice system handle a crime of this magnitude when the perpetrator was legally a minor? Prosecutors made the decision to charge Philip as an adult. They argued that the severity of the crime, the planning involved, and the efforts to conceal it demonstrated a level of intent and awareness that justified adult charges. He was indicted on first-degree murder, aggravated rape, and armed robbery, though some charges would later be dropped or altered during legal proceedings. The legal process was long, complex, and emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. The defense argued that Philip's age and mental state should be central considerations. Psychologists testified about his psychological profile, his writings, and his emotional development. The prosecution countered with evidence of planning, control, and deliberate action. During the trial, details emerged that horrified the public. Investigators revealed that Philip had written violent stories and expressed disturbing thoughts long before the crime. Teachers and counselors testified about changes in his behavior. Friends and classmates described him as increasingly isolated, Despite these revelations, the jury ultimately focused on the facts of the crime itself. After deliberation, Philip Chism was convicted of first-degree murder. The verdict carried an automatic sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. That sentence, however, did not mark the end of the legal battle. Appeals followed, particularly in light of evolving Supreme Court rulings regarding juvenile sentencing. Courts across the United States were grappling with whether life without parole sentences for minors violated constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment. Philip's legal team argued that sentencing a 14-year-old to die in prison ignored the potential for rehabilitation and change. Prosecutors maintained that the crime was so extreme that it warranted the harshest possible punishment. After years of appeals and resentencing hearings, the original sentence was upheld. The courts ruled that this case fell into the rare category of crimes committed by juveniles who demonstrated irreparable corruption. Life without parole remained in place. For the community of Danvers, the legal outcome brought little comfort. The loss of Colleen Ritzer left a permanent wound. She was remembered not only as a teacher, but as a daughter, a sister, and a friend. Vigils were held. Scholarships were established in her name. Her classroom became a symbol of both dedication and loss. The case also sparked national conversations about school safety, mental health, and early intervention. Many asked whether the tragedy could have been prevented if warning signs had been addressed more aggressively. Others questioned how schools balance support for troubled students with protection for staff. Teachers across the country expressed fear and anger. Many spoke openly about the vulnerability educators face, often working alone with students behind closed doors. The assumption that a classroom is inherently safe was no longer unquestioned. The Colleen Ritzer case became more than a criminal trial. It became a cautionary tale about ignored warnings, systemic gaps, and the fragile line between help and harm. It forced educators, parents, and policymakers to confront uncomfortable truths about violence, responsibility, and trust. Years later, the story still resonates. Not because it is unique, but because it exposes how ordinary settings can become the stage for extraordinary tragedy. A school, a teacher staying late, a student asking for help. There were no dramatic warning sirens that day, no visible danger that could be easily avoided, just a series of small, human decisions made in a place where people believed they were safe. And that is perhaps the most haunting part of all.